All right, the Des Moines City Council Public Safety and Emergency Management Committee meeting is now called to order. The first thing up is the approval of our February meeting minutes. Do I have a motion? So moved.
Second.
I have a second. Okay, any discussion? No, all in favor? Sorry, you guys. Okay, minutes passed. The next item up is the substation closure, and I think we probably have a briefing from the chief.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council, and those listening at home. We have three items we'll go over. We'll go over them in kind of sequential order here. I think the first one is the storefront closing. As part of the budget decisions at the end of 2024, we made the decision to close the Redondo Police storefront located on 272nd in the shopping complex there. Our lease for that property ran through March 31st, so we didn't close it immediately on the end of the year and pay close fees. We were under lease commitment until the end of March. So at this point, all staff have moved out. There's no staff currently working out of the building. Monica, our GPS co-responder, Corey, our code enforcement officer, and Tanya, our community service officer, worked out of that building. They've all moved back to the building, all their furniture, and they are moved in to our building on the main PD building. The landlord's done an inspection, given us a list of items that need to be fixed, repaired, put back in like condition. We have to take down the signs. We have to do some other repairs to the building where we had to put, radios, holes in walls for radios, that kind of stuff. We have to make those repairs. It looks like our move-up costs are going to run somewhere around the $5,000 mark, which is not unreasonable given the amount of work. And to try to minimize the cost of the city, Public Works is actually doing a large amount of the work for us. Including moving equipment, et cetera. We also have repurposed a lot of the equipment in that building, chairs, printer screens, that kind of stuff was reasonably new. So we've repurposed that across the city as well. So not making waste of it, rather getting rid of some old outdated stuff wherever we can in the city and repurposing anything we're taking out of the building. So that is the status on Redondo. We will be out keys in hand by the end of the month. Second thing is body-worn cameras. We had a grant through WASPIC for $69,000 to upgrade our body-worn camera systems. We were using about a 5-year-old technology on body-worn cameras that was no longer supported by Motorola. So we wrote a grant for the replacement through WASPIC. We were awarded $69,000. We negotiated that was actually quite a bit less than what it actually costs to upgrade to the brand new fanciest cameras that they make. They worked with us and actually adjusted the price to match and align with the grant funding. So we have replacement for all of our body-worn cameras. In doing that upgrade, we were in conversation with them. We had about $7,000 in sales tax and some other fees, extra batteries that we were going to cover out of city funds. They had extra funds, and we actually adjusted and rewrote the grant as well to cover that. So truly at no cost to the city, we ended up adjusting it up to $77,000 and covering all of the cost of upgrading our equipment. So yeah, it's actually really cool. Very good. WASPIC was wonderful to work with, and really having the state fund this is great, both from the accountability standpoint of the officers having the camera, but also from the city. There's several advantages financially. One thing is our cameras were out of warranty, so every time they go down, we were paying out of our pocket. The new cameras come with a 5-year warranty, so we don't have to worry about our equipment for the next 5 years. Motorola also extended our contract, and we have an amazing contract with Motorola. When we first went to body-worn cameras, we were the first Motorola customer in the area, so they gave us a really amazing deal that included our digital storage. They have grandfathered that in and rolled that forward in a new agreement to continue to include our digital storage in the cost of the cameras. So unlike paying a monthly storage fee for the digital storage, we're getting our digital storage included with our cameras. And that also will be the life of the cameras. So for the next 5 years, we'll have our digital storage as well covered. One of the other things that we found out as we were going through this process is our agreement also includes cloud storage for digital evidence. So right now we are putting a lot of our digital evidence on a J drive and maintaining a server here at the city with a lot of our digital evidence. As we were looking at our contract, we realized we could actually upload a lot of that onto their cloud drive. Advantage to the city is it clears up space and we can use that server for other purposes, as well as IT is not maintaining the additional servers. So each one of those servers is expensive, both in the operation as well as the maintenance, and we were able to clear that up. So this is good to the city on multiple fronts, both in the efficiencies that we're getting the city and also really putting us in a position where we don't have to budget for camera maintenance and repair for the next 5 years. So it's really quite a good deal from the city, and kind of a gift on WASPIC awarding us the grant to do this project. So, yes, sir.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. One, the cloud server security level is the highest around, or?
That's correct. So all of the server space we use is secured and licensed by the FBI. They use federal evidence to store it on them. The way they do the cloud is they actually break the evidence apart, is what I understand. I'm not a tech guy, but that there's small piece of evidence stored in a bunch of different locations. And if you don't have the encryption keys to get it back, you can't make any sense of the data that you're actually gathering off the cloud. So it is secured, and the FBI certifies it as a certified safe spot for digital evidence.
And are you going to be able to do some kind of planning so in 5 years when warranties start running out, we're ready to switch over to the next latest and greatest? Or is that, at this point, we keep our fingers crossed?
Yeah, if Motorola wants to keep working with us forever, this is kind of like, remember when you got that very first cell phone, you got that really, really sweet deal that was like $14 a month, and as long as you never changed your plan, it was $14 a month? We're in that world with Motorola right now. So as long as we can stay on the plan that we have, most people pay for their digital evidence on a terabyte basis, and it gets quite expensive quite quick. The fact that that's included in our existing program, we wouldn't want to change that term of agreement if we didn't have to. How long they're willing to maintain that term of agreement, I don't know. We know for now it's 5 years. So that's the term that we have now. At the end of that, there's only really 2 people doing this work. The other one is Axon. And I haven't done the hard work on this, to be fully transparent, but Chief Cooey, before he left, said he was estimating about $500,000 would be the cost to transition into Axon because of the way they set up their initial purchase and their servers. So where this was 100% funded through grant and was about $77,000, the equivalent product through Axon is substantially more expensive.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting this isn't a great deal. I'm glad to hear it. It's wonderful. But in 5 years, you know, theoretically, Motorola could say, thank you, stick with us, and it's going to cost you this, plus your cameras are all out of warranty now, and you could have a lot more cost. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, in full transparency, the life on these cameras are like any other technology. They will only support the camera for a period of time. That's part of why we had to do the upgrade. These are a 300, a V300. They no longer support them at all. So as these go down, they're essentially garbage. Compared to the new cameras will be supported for the 5-year life. So at the end of 5 year, you are correct. We'll have to make a budget and a financial decision at that point how we want to maintain body-worn cameras. I would advocate that it's kind of essential equipment at this point, but we will certainly look at grants and look at opportunities when we get there. Hopefully we'll be in a different budget situation 5 years from now, and that also offers some flexibility to look at how are we going to build out the need to maintain the infrastructure.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you to come talk for me. I'm just going to say, this is fantastic. I'm just really impressed. That's all I have to say. Also, you know, is that something, just another idea, was that something recently, it was the AI in law enforcement? Over in Redmond, they did a big day-long deal, and it all was tied into, is it Axon or Axion? Yeah. And so is Motorola moving forward in that realm at all?
So there's a lot of AI overlap work going on,
yeah.
And I think if I remember it, Redmond is doing a couple of programs. One, they're doing a drone-based program where drones are responding to calls for service, okay. And then there also is some work with auto-writing your reports based on body-worn cameras. I think at this point the general advice is that that's not a good idea to be doing quite yet. That we're a ways out from. Theoretically, the computer writes a report, then the officer verifies the information is accurate. Obviously, once an officer affixes their signature to anything, if there's an inaccuracy in there, they accept the responsibility for that inaccuracy. And I think right now, the general advice is that it is better to not subject your officers to the potential of making that mistake and ending up with a dishonesty complaint against an officer where really it was AI had written something and you didn't double check it carefully enough. So I think right now the prosecutor's office and most legal advisors are generally saying to steer away from that yet. We're not quite there yet.
Thanks.
The computers might need a few million more reps to get that down.
Yeah, and my concern is protecting the officer. We have the video. We can clearly watch the video. It's publicly disclosable. There's no secret in what's on the video. I think when we actually have the computer write the report, it can get into some dangerous ground where the officer is now testifying to something that's been created by a third party or by a technology, and it just is, we aren't quite there yet. I think we'll get there, but I don't think we're quite there yet.
That would be a brutal Brady listing.
It is absolutely a Brady issue is what it would come up to. Brady being a requirement if an officer ever has an issue with dishonesty in their file, we have a requirement to disclose that information to all courts. So anything prejudicial to the prosecution's case has to be disclosed under Brady. So clearly we would not want to have an accidental Brady. Any questions before we move on from body worn camera? All right, the next two agenda items are things that came up at the last meeting that you guys had asked for a little more information on. One was a little bit of quick introduction to some crime stats. What are our stats looking like 23 to 24, a quick snapshot from that lens, and some more updates on crime stats in this forum. And the other one was to have the fire department come in and talk a little bit about the fire department lens on how are we serving our community through our fire district and through our fire partners. So with that, I'm going to start with a quick crime stat thing. I'm going to try not to take all the time to make sure South King has plenty of time to cover their material, but we're hitting two of the items he asked us to add to the agenda. Uh-oh.
If it doesn't work, I can do it from here.
It is not working in any... Nothing.
As soon as she touches it, it'll work fine.
It's what's going to happen. I tried on and off. I thought maybe it was rigged backward even. Okay, so it's going to be like baseball. The steel sun comes in. We're going to the next one. So first, just a little bit about crime stats. And we have different ways that we collect crime stats. We get them from our record management system, which is after an officer writes a police case, what information goes in the police case. We have CAD, which is what's dispatched, and often those are not the same thing. A lot of times officers get sent to one thing, and when they get there, it's something completely different. So there's going to be discrepancy in those two data. And then we send everything into a standardized format called NIBRS and submit it to the state. And WASPIC at the state is contracted by the state legislature to create the Crimes in Washington report, which is standardizing every agency's data across the nationally standardized model under NIBRS, and then to produce a report so you can look at your data relative to the data of everybody else around you in a way that we all agree is exactly how we're going to record calls. There's some finesse that goes into that. We used to use a program called UCR, which was a universal crime reporting, UCR, which was the old FBI way of creating data. Everybody has now switched to NIBRS. They are not apples to apples way of viewing crime stats. So if you look at older crime stats and try to compare them and say, hey, 10 years ago our crime was much lower than today, often what you're looking at is a UCR way of looking at things. And UCR says when you have 5 different crimes at an event, you only look at the highest crime. So DV, burglary, auto theft, rape, homicide is one event in UCR as a homicide. That's the highest category event. You don't count the 4 other crimes. NIBRS is much more accurate because it counts every crime involved in the event. It also makes an artificial appearance that your crimes went through the roof, when really what you're doing is actually capturing the exact same event where you have 5 entries instead of 1 entry. So when you look historical, if you go too far back, just be aware that sometimes you'll hear that discussion. I just always like to help people understand what NIBRS is, because people often don't know how to compare stats over time and don't understand that there's multiple platforms that we draw data from. Did you get it? Oh,
Batteries.
you were already my hero, but now you're like next level. Bonnie, whew.
I pass it off to Maria.
So Next crime is just looking at our calls for service. One of the things that's interesting over time in this community is that your calls for service have stayed relatively stable over the last 5 years. You'll see that there's some up and down, which are always going to have some variation. But fundamentally, you've been within about 10% of calls for service over the last 5 years. That is somewhat of an abnormality. Most communities have actually seen an increase in crimes, the calls for service. So a little bit of an abnormality, a little bit probably of a gift, given that at our staffing level, we can't handle many more calls for service than where we're already at. So when you're running 100 miles an hour, if you start adding 10% a year to this, and eventually that will happen in our community, but so far we've kind of been a little bit lucky on this. But right now our calls for service are sticking between 18 and 19,000. Early numbers this year are more or less on pace with those numbers. Yes, sir.
Can you define call for service so everybody knows?
Sure.
And speaking of statistics and comparisons.
Yeah.
That's sort of
So a dispatch call for service is anytime somebody calls into the 911 system and the call generates a police response. So that's anything where they say we need to have an officer. These are not necessarily all crimes. So some of this is where you go do a welfare check on somebody in need. Some of this is a car's broken down where you go push it out of the roadway. Some of this is a vehicle accident. Some is a shooting. It is everything that results in a police officer dispatched to the event. So that's what a dispatch call for service is. Absolutely. Something. There's a. Oh, there we go.
I'll just stay right here. You just, and I'll do it.
So first we'll go kind of big picture, and then I'm going to break down these crime stats for you. And back one slide. Kind of big picture, and then we'll break down more specifics. Overall, we actually saw an 8% decrease in crime last year. It is not across the board. Some things went down, some things went up, and we'll cover what those are and what some of the drivers of those are. Things that we saw go down last year. Homicide went down last year. I will be fully transparent. It looks like a really big number because it went from 2 to 1. So in the big picture, it's such a small number, you get a huge variation. If you go to 3 next year, it's going to show a 300% increase. It's not necessarily a very reflective number because the number is so small. Big ones that are very reflective in our community is a 43% decrease in burglaries and a 41% decrease in auto thefts. Those are fairly substantial crime fighting numbers. A lot of people are crediting the auto theft to several things. Some is state legislative changes that have helped law enforcement in their response. Some of that has been some help from the prosecutor's office and some work that they've been doing to hold high visibility chronic offenders accountable. Prosecutor Mannion has been very forward-speaking and forward-thinking on how to address some of these issues and really been a good partner in driving that down. And also a decrease in weapons offenses. So less weapon-related crimes in our community. This is the one that will get everybody's attention. I need to put some context in it. Drug and alcohol offenses have increased by 283%, which on the surface is going to get everybody's eyes to widen up really quickly. And then we have to remember what happened over the last couple of years. So after the last couple of years, we had a Supreme Court ruling that said the drug law in the state of Washington was unconstitutional, and there was no criminal offense for drugs in the state of Washington. We then had a legislative change that drugs were made illegal again, but the law enforcement tool to enforce them was functionally not present without a bunch of other intervention methods in place that were not built out in most communities, including Des Moines. And the follow-up was the reintroduction of making drugs illegal under the misdemeanor statutes the way they are now, which allowed law enforcement. So while it shows 283% increase, what that is reflective of is they became enforceable again. So before that, the enforcement numbers were negligible, and then they became more realistic of normal law enforcement activity. So you probably will see that normalize over the next couple of years as it just becomes the law in the state again. So
it's a straight possession case. Possession with intent, not
correct.
Sales.
Correct.
Straight possession cases that were not enforceable, correct?
Yes, that is correct. You always have been able to enforce sales and distribution cases. It's the possession that was changed. Possession has now been introduced as a misdemeanor level offense, but reintroduced as a criminal offense as opposed to what that stood before. And I'm assuming you know the history here. I won't go too deep. it only allowed officers to make a criminal enforcement after a certain amount of referrals to social service agencies, but there was no methodology to document, track, and enforce that. So it was nearly impossible for an officer to make a criminal arrest under the old statute. So the new statute is a much more reasonable middle ground for how to enforce public use of drugs in our communities.
Question. So let's say you took last year off the stats, you know, bar, whatever. And so what would the offenses go up if you compared it to 2023 versus 2022?
So this is comparing 2022 or 23 to 24. I would have to go back further than that. I think the Supreme Court ruling is a 2021 decision that was then it was in 2022 that they put the what they called the Blake fix in. And I think it was 2024 when they reintroduced the misdemeanor version. So I think we had about a 3-year window. So I would have to go back further, and transparently, I don't have numbers going that far back. I would have to do some research to do that.
Just for some miscellaneous, it might have gone up, but definitely not 283.
Yeah, that's correct. I think it is a far more nominal amount if you look at it historically.
Well, something,
Transparent, we are dealing with an epidemic of fentanyl abuse in our community. I don't want to underscore that drugs are very present in our community. The presence of particularly fentanyl has gone up dramatically in our community. And we see evidence of that in the overdose deaths. That's the easiest place to see whether or not you have an issue with drugs, for lack of a better way to say it, is when you look at, are you seeing people suffer from the overdose? And clearly our community is disproportionately impacted by overdose deaths in South King County as a whole. If you look at the magnification in South King County, particularly in our communities, our more impoverished communities, is dramatically different as you look at the fentanyl rates. So I just want to make sure that I'm transparent that there is clearly an increase in overdose deaths and in the lethality of the drugs that are in our community. Next slide. Make sure I'm not chewing your time. This is just a little bit more of a way of looking at the way NIBRS classifies stats. So we look at crimes against persons, crimes against property, crimes against society, and then we also pulled out this category of community caretaking. I know this community's done a lot of investment in Monica and in this work around how we respond to people in crisis. So you're going to see increased work in the community caretaking, which is what I would expect to see when we have somebody specializing and focusing on that work. And then the one that I also think is very important, you all know how I feel about active police enforcement, traffic enforcement being in our community. So you will see that there's an increase in traffic enforcement as well. So looking at what are the patrol officers doing with their free time, particularly when you look at where our staffing's been and at the number of vacancies we've had, to see us actually increasing our on-view activity is a testament to your officers doing amazing work in your community. So as we look through these one at a time, what you'll see is some of this is going to be legislatively changed, some of this is going to be prosecution. Some of these numbers look really big, but as I said, it's a very small number. Like you see there's a 19% increase in sex offenses, but really that represents 5 cases. So a lot of this is a little bit disproportionate because the categories don't have a lot of activity. So that's kind of how you would see this. I have the full data that I can do to support this, but these are things that kind of like the snapshot now is probably better, and wait for NIBRS, which is going to break this down in a much more accurate way versus this is grabbing information from CAD and RMS, which is not as accurate as what you'll see in July when I do the NIBRS report for you guys. Next slide. And then real quickly, just highlighting each one, crimes against person overall is up 9%. The biggest driver in this is assaults. As far as the number, interestingly, it's assaults not domestic, which means it's assaults in your community that are not tied. So these are your typical fights, that kind of thing. So increase in the violence between 2 parties in our community, but not in the domestic violence category, which actually has shown a decrease. So I don't know that I can particularly make sense of that. Yes, sir.
Just more bars. Are these occurring around bars, or do you know? Have you done any look at that?
I haven't dove into it to that level. The one that is over the last several years has been very dramatic has been domestic violence. Domestic violence cases have been increasing over the last several years, and I think some of this ties back into COVID. Some of this ties into more people being home in confined spaces together. I think part of it is a reporting issue. One of the things you find with domestic a lot is domestic violence, assault, or domestic violence crimes. They're often called in by a third party. And one of the things COVID did was had a lot more people at home to call in. So where the victim might not be calling for help, their neighbor might be. So I actually think in some ways the increased numbers might have been also increased ability for victims to get help and support as well. So there's different ways to look at what might have been driving that. This is not showing that. It's actually showing the opposite, which is the non. So it could be bar related, it could be highway related, it could be transit related, it could be some of the community stressors over the last several years have driven people to be more reactionary. It could be some combination of all of the above. Next slide, please. Kind of hit on this a little bit earlier, but the biggest drivers in seeing a 16% decrease in crime against property is auto theft and burglary, down dramatically. The state of Washington has been one of the #1 states in auto theft, particularly when we look per capita. There's some debate depending on whose numbers you want to believe all the way through, but we are somewhere in the top 2 or 3 metropolitan areas in the nation in auto theft per capita. So seeing that come down is impressive. Also seeing burglary come down is important. Those are people who are committing these crimes are violating one of the most sacred places people have, which is their own home. So seeing burglaries come down is definitely a good thing. Both of those are, in my belief, tied to a combination of enforcement and enforcement at all levels. So after the officer's handing the case to the prosecutor, they're getting filed. People are being held accountable. I don't think there's nearly as many people doing these crimes as there is a few people doing a lot of these crimes. So I think it is important to see enforcement on some of these crimes that are violating people's personal spaces. Next slide.
I'm not as aware of the categories up there. What is a felony that goes to the prosecutor's office, and what do we take care of up there?
So anything felony related is going to be auto theft, burglary, identity theft, most frauds, as long as they're over $2,000, I think is the prosecutor filing and disposition. I think the FAD is $2,000 on that now. Robbery would always go to the prosecutor, and then theft is always going to be local unless it's over the filing standard, and the filing standard is, I think it's $2,025. The state law is $750, but that hasn't been adjusted since like the 80s, so the prosecutor can adjust it for inflation. I think right now it's at $2,500 is the filing limit. The exception to that is chronic offenders and organized retail theft. Those we will send into the prosecutor, and they'll file those as felonies if it is one of those 2 categories.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Next slide. Next slide is, again, we kind of talked about this. Drugs, alcohol is really the driver on this. This is police officers enforcing the drug laws in our community. There's a little bit of alcohol enforcement in this as well. I noticed when I was doing some stats for Redondo, there was some alcohol enforcement in the Redondo area. So there's a couple of alcohol cases in here, but largely this is going to be tied to people using drugs in our community, openly using drugs in our community. Next slide. And the final slide is reflective of what police officers are doing with their free time when they're not on a call for service. And what we see is there's an increase in the patrol activity. The one thing I had her also add in here, because I think it's a direct correspondence, when you see a 10% increase in traffic enforcement and you see a nearly 10% decrease in traffic collisions, I think there's a direct correlation between a realistic fear of being held accountable for your behaviors while driving and the subsequent willingness or involvement in vehicle collision. So I do believe there's a direct correlation between those 2 stats. So I just had them added there so you could see them visually that one is definitely impacting the other. And I do want to point out again, we've had a couple talks at this committee about how much we've struggled with staffing over the last year. And to see the officers actually increasing their numbers while being at minimum staffing at almost all points in time over the last year is actually a testimony to the officers really doing the right thing with their time and focusing on public safety and being dedicated servants to this community. So I think really this showcases the men and women doing the work in our community, really being committed even during some hard times to getting it done. So really just gratitude for them in this slide. And that is my last slide. So any questions?
Yeah, what, just for the sake of letting everybody know, what are the non-traffic citations? So, not speeding.
So there's a lot of things that we cite. That can be fireworks violations, that can be open container violations, that can be blocking sidewalks. There's all sorts of things it can be that would fall in that category. It's a pretty broad spectrum of things that are non-criminal and that we don't do a criminal case, but rather are a civil penalty.
Okay, so it's an infraction as opposed to a crime.
That's correct.
Excellent.
Good.
Thank you. Lots of good information there.
And
Left them a half hour.
I know, I was trying not to jump on his time. So with that, really, it is great use of our time to make sure that this is a public safety meeting. I know a lot of times it's become very law enforcement centric, but really our partners in almost everything we go to are the fire department. It's pretty rare that we're not co-responding to stuff in our community as it relates to public safety. So great idea from the committee, and certainly welcome our partners from fire.
We good? Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invite. I appreciate it. And Chief Bowe, thank you for taking the time to meet with me and kind of discuss the committee and your overall needs. I was made aware of this about a week ago, so the numbers and everything I'm going to present to you today is really just the first step on kind of introducing or reintroducing the fire service to you and highlighting some of the things that we do. Not everybody is aware of what the fire department is actually capable of, so that's something that we're trying to work on and trying to broaden our information outreach. So with that, for me personally, just so you know, my name is Brad Cheney. I've been with South King Fire for about 17 years now. I grew up in the city of Federal Way, got hired in 2007. I spent the first few years here in the city of Des Moines working at Station 67. Moved around, became a hazmat technician, then got promoted to lieutenant, then got moved back up to Des Moines and worked at 67s again for several years. So I've probably spent about 6 years in the city of Des Moines serving the community there. And then I fell in love with community affairs. And so this is now my job, is coming to the community and you know, the city councils and providing as much information as we can about who we are and what we do. So with that, I present to you South King Fire. Oh, my video's not playing. Well, that's all right. I think it probably just didn't download because it was with the PowerPoint. But South King Fire, we do cover the cities of Federal Way and Des Moines. We can go to the next one. It's 41 square miles altogether. So it's about 160,000 community members. And last year, we ran 27,264 calls for service. Over the last 10 years, it's been over a 50% increase. And we've only added one aid car. So that was part of the funding initiative that we did with the fire benefit charge. So hopefully we'll be able to start adding some more resources. Next slide, please. Altogether, we have 161 firefighters, and we're doing a hiring process, so we hope to add more. Right now, I believe we just hired another individual for day staff, so I think we're up to 37 day staff personnel. That's everybody that supports the fire district, whether it's finance, HR, groundskeeping, fleet, everything in between that helps the organization run. Altogether, we do have 7 responding fire stations and 1 logistics fleet center that basically provides everything that we need in order to be able to do our jobs. And the fleet center maintains all of our apparatus. And then, of course, we have 1 training center. Our training center is actually a regional asset. So for everybody that's not aware, every agency south of Seattle in South King County is called Zone 3. We do everything together now as a consortium. We know that when we have major calls, we're crossing jurisdictions all the time. It was crucial for us to be on the same page. It didn't do us any good to have 13 different fire departments doing 13 different things. So we all have been training together and doing everything exactly the same for a while now. And the training consortium. You'll see people coming from Woodinville, Tukwila, Puget Sound Fire, everywhere. You'll see them over here helping us out, and that's just part of that consortium process. Make sure that we're providing the best service possible to our community. Next slide, thank you. So firefighters do work 24-hour shifts. Depending on our staffing, our daily resourcing on average right now is about 29. That means one battalion chief, that's somebody who's in charge of the entire shift. So we do have 4 shifts. We have an A shift, B, C, and D shift, and the battalion chief is responsible for the entire shift, organizing training, and then running any major calls, of course. We do have 4 aid cars that are in service. A lot of what we do is EMS, Emergency Medical Services. So we are first responders and do a lot of medical work. So we use the aid cars to act as a buffer so that the fire engines are in service more often, because the fire engines have a lot more capabilities and fires are a lot more catastrophic than just a generic aid call. So the aid cars are a buffer, and they run a majority of the aid calls. But we do have 6 engines in service, and then 1 ladder truck. The ladder truck, we don't have a lot of high-rise here, but we have a lot of mid-rise, and so that ladder truck is able to reach 105 feet. That allows us to get to the upper floors and most of the roofs within our jurisdiction. One of the divisions that doesn't get mentioned very often, but I think is very noteworthy as far as providing safety to our community, and that is our prevention division. Currently, they are located out of City Hall and Federal Way. That will be changing here. We bought a new administrative building, so everybody will be housed together. But they have a division chief of prevention. They house our fire marshal and our assistant fire marshal, 2 deputy fire marshals that are actually firefighters, and then 3 professional fire and life safety inspectors. Those individuals inspect each and every commercial occupancy within our district. They also check all the apartments, senior housing, and everything like that. So their job is to go through and make sure that all of the safety systems that were designed to keep people safe are being tested and are actually up and running. So they work with city managers, city developers. They work with all the property managers and everybody, just to make sure that the systems are meeting code. So they're kind of the workhorse in the background that doesn't get the recognition they deserve. We do have a plans examiner that reviews every plan that comes across the desk of either City of Des Moines or Federal Way, make sure it's being built to code. And then the administrative assistant, who of course is the glue of the operation that keeps it all together. Our fleet division, this is something that's really exciting. That picture that you see there is actually a new facility within the last few years. Fire trucks have gotten bigger over the years. We've kind of become a stopgap for a lot of other emergencies, just like police unfortunately fell to become a stopgap for mental health issues. We became a stopgap for a lot of other things as well. So the fire engines got bigger. Then we couldn't work on the fire engines because our building was built in 1970. So we finally got a new building, and now you can see we can actually lift our fire trucks up, and we can do almost all of the work in-house. So the capability of being able to turn rigs around and get them back into service has improved drastically. So when you're doing things in-house, you're not waiting on somebody else's timelines, and it saves us a lot of money as well. So big investment, but we have 1 fleet supervisor and 3 fleet mechanics that oversee all of our fire apparatus and fire buggies, as some people like to call them, the SUVs.
Here in Des Moines or somewhere else in Federal Way, you have one central place where you go to do the maintenance on them.
That's right.
In a station? Is it one of the stations, or is it somewhere else?
It's a whole separate station. It's a whole separate building that's just for fleet. I think altogether it's got 4 huge bays. We can even fit that 105-foot ladder inside one of the biggest bays there. But we also have reserve apparatus pretty much at all times. So if something happens to engine 367, they will come up with a new engine, and then we'll swap everything out, and then they'll take the engine back and be able to repair it in a timely fashion. So
Interesting.
it runs like a well-oiled fire machine. All right, our logistics division, this was a big asset for us, especially during COVID. We actually were a collection point for FEMA and for FEMA supplies, and then we would help distribute them to surrounding agencies as well. But firefighters live at the fire station, so we clean, we wash laundry, we mop, we do everything, we take care of it. So everything from soap to emergency supplies, gowns, goggles, you name it. And then of course all of our firefighting equipment there. We have one logistics officer and a logistics clerk, but we are just now adding another one to help maintain. So now when you talk about firefighters, most people tend to just think about fires, and then of course I alluded to the fact that we also do EMS. We are all EMTs, which is emergency medical technicians, but that's just kind of the backbone of the fire service. There's also a lot of special teams, just as law enforcement has bomb squads or SWAT, things like that. We also have special teams that really require a lot of extra dedication and training. And so to highlight those for you, one of them is really the technical rescue team, which is what you see here. That's driver engineer Travis McKinney. Travis is actually responsible for establishing the guidelines for trench claps within King County. He was a big part of that. And what you see here, unfortunately, is a fatal trench collapse that happened in Renton. So when a big incident like that happens, all the agencies have to come together. They bring their technicians and all of their equipment. And what you see here, just to give you a quick explanation, it's a 20-foot drop, and unfortunately the patient is down at the bottom. So they lower these wooden boards down the side, they use these hydraulic struts, and they use hydraulic pressure to hold up and stabilize the walls. They can then go down inside. We have some firefighters that are down inside digging the dirt away from the body. This vacuum truck that we have a partnership with comes up, they use their big hose, they reach down inside, they suck up the dirt as we dig it away from the body so it doesn't keep collapsing on them. And then once we get that out of the way, we get the vacuum truck out of the way, and then the aerial ladder shoots its ladder over. We create a rigging system, we lower firefighters back in, they hoist the patient up using the ladder and a rigging system. So it's a very long technical process, it's very scary, but a lot of patience and smart individuals are able to make things like that happen so the family can have a proper burial. They also train a lot in confined space, structural collapse as well. So imagine, that big earthquake that, that could be coming. They train for that kind of stuff all the time. And rope rescue, I'm sure a lot of people saw not too long ago, a couple of years ago now, where the semi-truck blew through the side of the bridge in New York and was hanging off the side. They had to lower somebody down to grab the driver and hoist them up. That's these guys. That's what they do. They train for that all the time. The trench rescue, as you see here, and then, of course, swift water rescue. We do respond down to the Green River, and so we assist in a multi-agency response for swift water rescues as well with the rescue team. The Marine team, very well known here in the city of Des Moines, a large boating community. We actually had the same vessel for almost 30 years. I want to say it was 30 or 31 years or so. I'll have to get confirmation on that. But we were actually able to partner with the state and reach out to them. We hired a legislative advocate, and we were able to secure $750,000 from Commerce to help purchase a new fireboat. The new fireboat cost us altogether about $1.2 million, so that was a huge savings for our citizens here. They obviously practice, navigation, search and rescue. They work in partnership with the Coast Guard all the time. So you'll see them out there in the Sound doing some training. Vessel assists, things happen all the time to boating communities, and so they practice that. Fires is a big one. We've had a couple marina fires, but none of them have been really significant. And I think that's a testament to the, I think that's a testament to the work that we do, and also the water systems that we have that lead down into the marina. That's a big factor. So And then what you see here is actually that big cargo container that caught fire down in Tacoma. They're out. They spent 4 days helping. I didn't know this, but you can't. When you think about it, you can't fill up a boat with water to put the fire out because you're going to sink it. And they had 30,000 gallons of diesel fuel. So what they had to do was they tried to put the fire out, but then it started to list. And so then we have to spend the next 4 days cooling the outside of the vessel to make sure it doesn't crack so that it doesn't sink. And then you just have to let the fire burn out once it's inside. So that's what we did for 4 days. Was we helped cool down the outside and prevent the pollution of the Puget Sound. And then close quarter maneuvering, that's just obviously knowing your vessel inside and out and being able to navigate inside a marina should something happen. Oh, this one's a video and it's not playing. I apologize. Hazardous materials. So these are the men and women that wear the full encapsulating suit that will walk through a toxic cloud of smoke to go stop a leak. I was on that team. It's scary, but it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of chemicals out there. So we're good at biological and chemical and radiation type events. We're really good at air monitoring. We have a weather system in our hazmat rig, so we can predict where a plume is going to go if we do have a leak, so we know exactly where to evacuate and work with law enforcement in order to be able to make that kind of stuff happen. Patching and plugging, I mean, we get vehicle accidents all the time, I-5, Pack Highway, Military, Highway 18, even all the way down into 167. Leaks happen, accidents happen, leaks happen, so we're trained a lot in being able to patch and plug. And then technical and mass decon, technical is more technical. You know, you've got something exposed to you and we need to decon you versus a mass decon. If something were to happen and you know, we were all exposed to something, we have the ability to set up a tent, fire up some showers, run a couple hundred people through, get you some Tyvek suits, start providing medical care. So we do train for those major disasters. Advanced decon and virus, that of course was a big factor when we had COVID-19, especially in the early days, didn't know what it was. One of the things that we set up, we were the only agency to do it, which was kind of cool, was we set up a decontamination station for law enforcement. So when law enforcement would encounter somebody, maybe place them under arrest, put them in their vehicle, come to find out that person had COVID, then you know they were exposed, and so they could come to our station any time of day, didn't matter, hop into our decontamination trailer, take a shower, fresh set of clothes, and then we would decon the police vehicle for them so they could get back in service. All right, so rescue swimmers, that's actually one of our newer, more progressive programs. The way it used to work back in the day was if there was a drowning incident, we would show up, we would keep everybody out of the water, and then we would wait for a dive team to come and search for a body. That is a recovery mission. We are not in the recovery business. We're in the rescue business. Travis McKinney, again, another progressive individual, he brought forth a rescue swimmer program and said, hey, we need to train firefighters to be able to get access into the water super fast. So that's what they did. We used to have a retired Navy SEAL that worked with us, Nick Spader. He helped create some of the guidelines as well, but their focus really is just rapid entry into any drowning incident. They practice their search and rescue. They've got dive patterns and breathing techniques that they practice all the time. You'll see them at the pool. You'll see them out in the Puget Sound practicing. An inflatable rescue boat, that's something that's new that we're adding. That's really just, that's not designed to slow them down. That's designed that if something happens and it's far away offshore, the rescue swimmers still get out there, but we can use the rescue team to bring that inflatable boat, take it out there, and now it becomes a platform from which they can search off of. So it provides a little bit of a break there. But altogether right now we have 38 swimmers that are spread throughout the district. They're on different shifts, different rigs, and that is designed so that when a water incident comes in, the hope is that you will have at least one rescue swimmer on that first dispatch. I could talk to you until I'm blue in the face about all the significant calls here, but the most important one to me that really it touches me every time, and I almost want to cry just thinking about it. But we did have, the Puget Sound's beautiful, but we had a 19, I think she was 19 at the time, a 19-year-old female who just thought she had reached the end of her rope, and so she drove into the Puget Sound, and the vehicle starts to fill with water, and as it does, it starts to pull away from the shore. The engine compartment fills, and so then it makes it nosedive, and it starts to pull it down underwater. And the first engine showed up, had a rescue swimmer on there, and he had got his stuff on. It was late at night. He started swimming out. The vehicle is now probably 50 yards off the shore. It's 10 feet underwater, and he gets above it. He can see that the headlights are still on. And as he's doing that, the second rig showed up with another rescue swimmer. So that person was suited up, swimming out there as fast as they could. The first swimmer goes down and verifies, yes, there's somebody inside the vehicle and they're in the passenger seat. He comes back up to catch his breath and work on his breathing technique. And the other rescue swimmer's right there. And he says, hey, I've got one. They're in the driver's seat. They go down, they break the window, they reach in, they cut the seat belt, and they're able to pull her up to the surface and swim her back to shore. There's law enforcement there protecting the scene. King County Medic 1, of course. We do CPR on her, and we shock her multiple times all the way up to Harborview. Ultimately, she is resuscitated. Now, what's really nice is that about a year later, she came back to say thank you with a whole new perspective on life. So we gave those two rescue swimmers the Medal of Valor. That's the second highest award you can get. Now, I share this story often because I think it just speaks to the testament of our rescue swimmers and our firefighters. And I shared it not too long ago with a different group, and this lady that I had actually worked with to organize the presentation pulled me aside afterwards with tears in her eyes, and she said, that story you shared, I know her. She used to work here, and I know her family. It's like, and I immediately felt awful, but she said, I always knew her story, but I never knew yours, so thank you. And then she pulled out her phone, and she showed me a picture of a young lady holding a brand new baby, and she said, this is her. 2 weeks ago, just gave birth to her first child, married, active in her church, doing all of these wonderful things. And so we don't brag very often. It's not something that we're inclined to do, but those are the incidents where it's like, yeah, we did something right. And that's what your firefighters do without ever asking for appreciation. So I just wanted to share that. I apologize, but that was certainly one aspect. Community affairs, that's me. That's just being out in the community, different groups, water lamp parades, you name it, the Santa parades. We've spent many of time together doing all sorts of different events and the trunk or treats, you name it. But I'm just an army of one. So, we're trying to add another public educator to the ranks, and so hopefully we'll be able to do some more activities. But it's just a way of us trying to maintain that connection with our community. All right, so the most important piece that you're probably interested in is the calls and the call volume. So this is really just the broad overview of South King Fire, and then the next slide I have it broken down into Des Moines, but we'll stay with the broad overview first. So again, 27,264 calls. The blue one, EMS, 78% basically of what we do. And a lot of people get confused by that number, and they say, well, hey, you're a fire department, why are you running so many EMS calls, and why don't you call yourself something different? Or, we get a lot of weird questions about that, and that's okay. But I try to explain to people that, when we respond to a fire, who am I actually there for? I'm not there for the house. I'm not there for the apartment. That doesn't really mean anything to me. I'm not there for the vehicle when we respond to a motor vehicle accident or a vehicle fire. It's a lot of fun, but I'm there for you. I'm there for the patient. So all of those things, when we start talking about stats and the way things are categorized, we're there to treat a patient. Everything else is really just something that came with it. So that's why that number is so high. Even when we respond on fires and things like that, there's always patients involved. But EMS calls, again, that's everything from COVID-19 that was still a huge part. That's kind of subsided a little bit. We're seeing a lot of flu right now. Cardiac arrest, we do a lot of CPRs, unfortunately. We have a beautiful community and nobody wants to leave. So everybody decides to age in place. So we have a lot of senior members in our community, and unfortunately, we're kind of getting to that time frame where people are starting to pass. So we do a lot of CPRs, unfortunately. Scenes of violence, you know, again, we're first responders, except for when it's really tough. That's when we wait for our law enforcement officers to clear the scene for us first. So they do a fantastic job. They understand what they're there for, you know, and they also do a great job trying to partner with us. And you know, there's times where they may not necessarily have the perpetrator, but there's people that need to be treated, so they provide a safety corridor for us to be able to make entry. We do have our own bulletproof vest. I'll wear mine next time. But they keep us safe, and so we're able to go in and quickly extract a patient. Sometimes they'll bring a patient out to us, depending on the situation. But we do respond to all of those calls as well. And then good intent, that's kind of a big one. False alarm and good intent, that's really where my job is trying to help educate our public on when to call 911, when not to. Lots of busy roadways, so you'll see car accidents. Every do-gooder that's driving by, hey, I just saw a car accident, you know, they're pulling off to the side. We don't know if they're hurt or not, but we still have to go. So that's part of that dispatch, that call for service that he was talking about too. But you know, canceled en route, things like that. There's been a few times where we get dispatched to barbecues that we're smoking in the backyard. I have yet to be offered dinner, so if the community can fix that for me, that would be great. But those are some of the challenges that we're always trying to navigate. You don't want to tell people not to call 911 because then that's probably when something's happening. But the false alarm, everybody's been there. You know, unfortunately, somebody burnt toast in their popcorn and in the microwave or whatever. But it sets off the smoke alarm at Judson Park, and then of course everybody has to come because it's a fire alarm at a huge facility. So we're always trying to battle those. But let's go to the next one. This one breaks it down more just for the city of Des Moines only. You know, again, kind of a short time frame, so we just went based off of zip codes and what we were able to extract from that. So for the city of Des Moines, the call volume last year was 5,146. So you can see, though, still 80% of what we do here is EMS. Again, quite a big aging population. Not as much traffic, you know, through here as there is with Federal Way, where we have the Highway 18 interchange with I-5 and the Military Road right there. But still pretty busy. It's still pretty busy. So anyways, yeah, the false alarms and service calls, those are still a challenge for us, and those are things that we're always looking to improve upon. So that's really all I've got for you today, but I am obviously happy to answer as many questions as possible.
Hopefully it's a quick one, but I don't know that it is. But yeah, we have a really funny border with Kent along the Pack Highway.
Right.
And how often do you end up
All the
crossing
time.
into a different jurisdiction versus you know, something that might be on this sheet that actually occurred in Kent?
Yeah. No, that's
How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's so a while ago, it used to be a much bigger problem. Again, the consortium is a huge piece for breaking down some of those barriers. The fire chiefs had kind of come to the realization that we're better and stronger together. And then also the upgrades in technology. And so now we use automatic vehicle locating. So that basically it's GPS, and we have run cards that are built out so that really it doesn't matter if it's a Kent call, it doesn't matter if it's a Burien call, whichever rig is closest, that's the one that's going, because that's the best service to the community. So that's all done through Valley Communications Center, same dispatch center that PD uses. But yeah, it's all done digitally now. So they just send the next closest rig. Yeah. So in full disclosure, we're crossing borders all the time. Yeah.
We present a unique challenge there.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much. I love hearing from you. So thank you for inviting him to come over and give us all this information. It's great to have you, Brad. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate the invite, and again, happy to come back if you have some further requests.
Oh,
just let me
absolutely.
know.
Thank you very
Great,
much.
thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes.
All right. So we are adjourned, and I think I'm gonna make sure, we probably won't start right on time at 6, a couple extra minutes, so, for the next meeting.